if you're attending the live stream right now. We're live on YouTube and Twitter. I've got Tanner back on. We're going to preview Week 13 for you guys. Just a little quick note, this is Mageddon for us this week. So we've got the Ravens, the Bills, the Bears, the Raiders, the Vikings, and the Giants all on bye. Lots of byes this week. We also saw an exciting Thursday night football match last night. The Seahawks at the Cowboys. It was a thriller till the end. The Cowboys really pulled it out. Dak looked great. The defense did not look great, allowed 35 points to the Seahawks, but got to give the Seahawks credit. They have one of the best wide receiver trios in the league. Zach Charbonnet also did a good job. Cowboys 41, Seahawks 35. I had the game as 27-20 as my prediction, so I was predicting a couple more punts in there, maybe some turnovers, but there weren't very many turnovers, and there were 0 punts in the game. Also to note is Charbonnet left the game with a bruised knee in the fourth quarter. Pete Carroll did say that it was some pretty significant swelling in that knee, so that'll be something to monitor going forward. Also to note, Kenneth Walker is still expected to be out next week with his oblique injury. It's kind of complex according to Pete Carroll, but we'll learn more on both injuries, I assume, next week heading into Sunday. So let's get this kicked off with first game we have. It's going to be the Chargers at the Patriots. Tanner, your Patriots taking on the Chargers. LAC has looked up and down this year. They can't really seem to win games they're favored in. Tanner, who do you have in this game that you think we should play in fantasy or sit in fantasy?
Gonna start at the tight end position for somebody I think that we should sit. I know that he had a touchdown last week, and that's Gerald Everett. I know my Patriots are one of the worst teams in the league, but our defense is still not that bad. We've given up the third fewest points to tight ends and only allowed 1 touchdown to the position all year. So while we're looking to ride the hot hand in Gerald Everett, I just don't see him having a productive day against the New England Patriots. How about yourself, Brady?
Yeah, honestly, I don't see him having a great day either. I actually have Justin Herbert as a bust this week. I think the Patriots defense is pretty solid, and he's going to have to go into Foxborough, and that is not a easy environment to play in for him. I think he will do decent, but you're probably having to start him this week due to all of our bye weeks. I just think he's going to bust. And if you can avoid him, I would try. He didn't do great last week. But I do have Keenan Allen and Austin Eckler as locks. I also have the Chargers defense as a start. And then one of the guys, probably one of the best matchups this week that I really love at the running back position is Ramondre Stevenson. I think he should be a lock in your lineup. He has done really well over the last couple weeks, and this Chargers defense cannot defend the run whatsoever. So I think Ramondre Stevenson should have a big game. Another one I would like to note on the Patriots side is Demario Douglas. If he does, in fact, clear protocol, I think he has a concussion right now. If he is healthy to go, I like him as a flex play, as a sleeper this week. I'll be listing out my full start, sits, sleepers, and busts tomorrow. But those are 2 guys for the Patriots that I really think have great matchups, and that I think you should try and get in your lineups if you are fighting for a running back or a wide receiver position and you have either of them. So I think those guys should be pretty good. And now let's move on to the Lions at the Saints. Tanner, who here stands out to you as far as start, sits, or sleepers or busts?
Same thing at the tight end position. I think a lot of people right now need a tight end, struggling to find a tight end. Maybe they have one, he's just not that productive. But a guy I like would be Jawan Johnson. If he's out there, I think you should go get him. A couple of pass catchers for the Saints are banged up, so we do expect to see an increase in volume for Jawan Johnson. Chris Olave is dealing with an injury right now. If he's out, I definitely would suggest to fire up Jawan Johnson. Now we know Alvin Kamara is going to be a lock. He's definitely a top 5 running back pretty much every week at this point. But yeah, Jawan Johnson, he should be available for you guys. I think I have him around tight end 10 on the week. I know that's not much per se, but with By McGinn going on week 13, that's one of the best values that you can get on the waiver wire. And for starts and sits in that game, Brady, who do you have?
So I've got Alvin Kamara should be a lock in everyone's lineup. I also had Juwan Johnson as a start. Like you said, he's a top 10 tight end this week. I also like Taysom Hill this week. And you have to start Chris Olave. If he goes, he's going to destroy this Lions defense. This Lions defense is not great, really. I can see this game kind of being high scoring if Olave gets in there. And if Olave does go, that really upgrades Derek Carr, in my opinion, especially in a week where we have a bunch of quarterbacks on bye. I think you can plug Derek Carr into your starting lineup and feel pretty comfortable about it. This Lions defense is atrocious. Jordan Love showed us on Thanksgiving how bad they actually were. And I think the Saints can do the same thing in New Orleans too. So that's something to monitor. You also have to probably lock in Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery into your lineup. You're locking in Amon-Ra. You're locking in Sam Laporta. Jared Goff would be a guy that I'd be hesitant to start after his performance last week, throwing all those interceptions. But this is such a bad bye week, so you may be forced to start Jared Goff, and I really don't mind it. This game, like I said, should be high scoring. The over-under is 45.5. I think it could go over that total pretty easily. A couple sleepers that I do like are A.T. Perry and Jameson Williams. They may be sitting around out there. Jameson Williams may be a little more rostered. A.T. Perry should be available, and I would upgrade him and Juwan Johnson, like you said, Tanner, if Chris Olave does not go. He did practice in full today. I just got that update about 30 minutes ago that he practiced in full, so that's a good sign for Olave heading into the weekend, but we'll know more on the situation as Sunday approaches, so definitely monitor that situation if you have Olave or need a tight end in Juwan Johnson or maybe a deep flex in A.T. Perry. Let's move on to the Falcons at the Jets. It's in New Jersey. Falcons traveling up there. And Tanner, who do you like in this matchup? It's not really an eye-catching matchup fantasy-wise with the over-under at 34, so not a lot of points projected in this game from the books. Who do you like, though?
Guy I like, I mean, pretty given, Bijan Robinson. I don't think we have to spend too much time talking about him. It is important to note, though, that he's finally starting to get a lot more touches in the red zone or in the green zone, as some like to refer to it as. So that's been encouraging. Definitely ride the hot hand with Bijan this week. Now, a guy that I'm not high on this week is Drake London. I know he had a pretty good game last week, but now he's got the Jets. The Jets have allowed 0 touchdowns to perimeter wide receivers this year. Sauce Gardner, I know oftentimes he's covering the number 2, but he's just been locking everyone down, and I would fade Drake London on Sunday if you can. Brady, how about yourself?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of Drake London either this week. I actually have Desmond Ridder as a bust. I would avoid both QBs in this game. There has to be better options out there for you on the waiver wire. I would even go Jake Browning of the Bengals over him, over both of these quarterbacks. Like you said, no one's really popping out. Both defenses, I think, should be started in this matchup, Falcons and the Jets. Not a lot of points are going to be scored here. Bijan for sure has to be locked in. I also think you should probably lock in Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson into your lineups. Now, if you have better wide receivers, you can bench Garrett Wilson, or even better running backs, you can bench Breece Hall. But with our options being limited this week, I would be okay with starting both of them if the situation is acceptable for your team. Guys I don't really like this week are Kyle Pitts. I mean, he could do well. I'm pretty sure the Jets aren't great against tight ends, but recent weeks he hasn't really performed. Hasn't really performed all year. It's really riding on the shoulders of Desmond Ridder to see what he does. This Jets defense could get pressure on Ridder, which could make him uncomfortable. I still think you gotta sit Kyle Pitts if you can, but if you have to start him, I don't mind it because the Jets are not great against tight ends. I have him as a sit this week. But if you have no one better, might as well throw a dart with Kyle Pitts. That position is weak as it is, and with all the buys, there's not a lot out there. I also have Tyler Algier as a sleeper. He could get into the end zone. He could get a little more touches, but this should be the Bijan Robinson show. We saw the Bijan Robinson show last week after the Falcons bye. I think we should see it again. So not really too many guys I'm high on. Kind of the must-start guys are must-starts, and then maybe start Kyle Pitts, maybe start Algier as a flex. But let's move on to a more exciting game with a higher over-under. It's a divisional matchup in the AFC South. It's going to be the Colts at the Titans in Tennessee. And Tanner, there are a couple guys here that we stole off the waiver wire this week, including Zach Moss and maybe the Colts defense. Who do you like in this matchup with the Colts and the Titans?
Yes, just going back on Kyle Pitts, I do think, guys, if you're out there in a 10-team league, Kyle Pitts is completely droppable. Jonnu Smith as well. It's just too unpredictable at this point. And even a guy like Jawan Johnson that we've mentioned and some of the other tight ends that we're going to mention, I would start over Kyle Pitts. So if you're in a more shallow league, definitely Kyle Pitts can be dropped. Now, looking at this game, I think the first person we have to talk about is going to be Zach Moss. This guy's undoubtedly a top 10 running back this week. Zach Moss, he's averaging 20.9 points per game in 4 games without Jonathan Taylor this year. He had his best game of the season when he ran for 165 yards and 2 touchdowns against this Titans team earlier in the year. I believe he totaled 195 yards in that game. The Titans have been tough in their last 3 games against the run, allowing only 2.7 yards per carry. But I still have Zach Moss undoubtedly as a top 10 running back this week. Another running back I like on the other side of the field is going to be Devin Singletary. He's more of an RB2 this week, given the matchup and the workload that he's getting. He had 6 catches last week. He's playing I'm off, aren't I?
Yeah, you're good. But you like Derrick Henry this week?
Derrick Henry, yeah, he found the end zone twice last week, which was nice. I believe we both had Derrick Henry anytime touchdown scorer, so
yep.
that cash. But Will Levis,
if you're
he
in
could
a
get
bind,
things going.
Yeah,
if you're in a bind. DeAndre Hopkins, receiver 3 at best. Who do you have in this game, Brady?
Yeah, so I think Derrick Henry, Zach Moss, 2 locks at running back. Michael Pittman lock at the wide receiver position. I think Josh Downs can be a flex for you. I also like the Colts defense in this matchup. The Colts defense has been getting a lot of points as of late, and I think they can get to Will Levis. They have a pretty good pass rush, and the Titans' offensive line is horrible. But they aren't too great at defending the run, which is why I think this could be a Derrick Henry game. I would sit Tajay Spears just because I think they're going to feed Derrick Henry, and I think they're going to try and play from ahead, which would include Derrick Henry running the ball. I do like Gardner Minshew, though, this week. I have him as a top 12 quarterback. He's a big-time sleeper. I would probably put him as a start just because of the bye weeks this week. I think Gardner Minshew can do really well. This Titans defense cannot defend the pass whatsoever. I actually have them as a bust this week. And I think Gardner Minshew can expose them with Michael Pittman and Josh Downs, even Zach Moss out of the backfield. So I do like a lot of Colts this week. Derrick Henry, maybe DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, you may just have to play D-Hop because D-Hop can do whatever D-Hop does. Colts aren't great at defending the wide receiver position. Another sneaky guy I like as a sleeper this week is Chig Okonkwo of the Tennessee Titans. Tight end position is kind of slim this week, and I don't mind playing him in deeper leagues, but it has to be pretty deep, honestly, or a tight end premium. But he has seen his volume uptick over the past couple weeks. I'm not confident in starting him. That's why I have him as a sleeper, but I think he can do decently, and Will Levis is going to have to find some people in this matchup other than DeAndre Hopkins if they want to get this offense rolling. So that's an interesting play at the tight end position.
And going off Gardner Minshew, yes, guy forgot to mention Michael Pittman Jr. I know he didn't put up great numbers against the Titans earlier this season, but Tennessee has been very generous to perimeter wide receivers this season, and I think you should fire up Michael Pittman Jr. I don't see how you can bench him during bye Mageddon, Week 13.
Yep.
Going on to the next game, we have the Cardinals at the Steelers. Brady, who do you like in these matchups?
So Cardinals at the Steelers. I think I'm going to be forced to start Kyler Murray this week. And the other guy on the Cardinals I like with him is Trey McBride. They've had a great connection. McBride has been amazing, which is why the Cardinals just released Zach Ertz. They didn't have really any need for Zach Ertz to play. Might as well get the young guy the snaps, and they're doing that. They released Zach Ertz, and it's the Trey McBride show. He's had an injury designation along with a couple other Cardinals wide receivers heading into this matchup, including Marquise Hollywood Brown, who I do not like in this matchup. I believe he's going to get shadowed by Joey Porter Jr., who has locked down number one wide receivers over the last couple of weeks. Some Pittsburgh guys I like, both running backs I really like. I know, Tanner, you do too, and we'll get into more detail when I ask you about your starts. The Steelers' defense, I think, has to be a lock this week. I think they can get pressure on Kyler Murray and make him run. And then Pat Freiermuth, we saw it last week. He was getting fed all throughout the game, and I think they're going to do the same. The Cardinals have not been great against wide receivers either, so Deontay and Pickens can be flex-worthy this week. It's just kind of hit or miss with the Steelers' offense as far as the pass catchers go on who's getting the ball. We know their two running backs are undoubtedly really good and consistently put up points this year. And I also have Kenny Pickett as a sleeper. I mean, with the position the way it is in deeper leagues, you may be needing to start him. And I think he's a pretty good option this week. I also am not a fan of James Conner, and I know you aren't, Tanner. So why don't you go into why James Conner is probably going to bust this week, even though it is a revenge game?
Yes. So James Conner, I understand, like you said, there's a narrative that he's going to have a revenge game. But I mean, listen, James Conner has had single digits in every week since week 3. And since they signed Michael Carter, he's lost his featured role. It's almost like they're splitting time now. So I do like the narrative of the revenge game. However, I do not like James Conner this week. Haven't seen much of a reason to trust him since week 3. Going back to what you said about Kyler Murray, I do think that his fantasy numbers have been better than his quarterback play. He really saved himself with a rushing touchdown in week 10. I do believe that Trey McBride is a top 3 tight end this week. I'd probably put him at number 3 behind Travis Kelce and Sam Laporta. Now, touching on the Steelers running backs, a couple of interesting notes that I wanted to get out there was Najee Harris. He is my start of the week this week for the running back position. He has 15.6 PPR points or more in 4 of his last 6 games. Though we've seen some changes in the Steelers offense, we know Matt Canada is not there anymore. That's kind of all we have to judge them off of is last week's performance. Najee still had 15 carries last week. The Cardinals have allowed a running back to score at least 12.7 PPR points in every game this season. Their defense has also allowed an average of more than 31 points per game to running backs since week 9. I think that both Najee and Jaylen Warren will be productive this week. I would give the edge to Najee because he gets the goal line carries. We saw what Kyron Williams did to this defense last week, and even backup Royce Freeman had a nice game too. And I expect to see something similar out of these Steelers running backs this week.
Yeah, I think you got to start them both. Like, they have looked atrocious. And on that Matt Canada note, the last time the Steelers had gone over 400 yards total was before Matt Canada got hired. It was like 500 something yards against the Browns in the playoffs. And then this past weekend, the second he got fired, the first game after he got fired, they put up 400 plus games. The drought lasted like 2 years. So expect this offense to be very, very good, especially against this weak Cardinals defense. And they're in Pittsburgh, which is really great. So, yeah, fire up both running backs. I really love them this week. Let's move on to the Dolphins at the Commanders. Dolphins are going into Landover, Maryland at the Commanders. Well, I think we're starting pretty much every Dolphin we can at this point. Tua, Raheem Mostert, Tyreek Hill, Devon Achan is looking to be back this week, Mike McDaniel said. Jalen Waddle, I'd even start the Dolphins defense. Some starts for the Commanders, maybe Terry McLaurin, maybe Brian Robinson. I'm not too confident in them, but they're the biggest names. A guy I like as a sleeper, I should say three sleepers all on the Commanders. Curtis Samuel has put up some really good numbers over the last couple weeks, and he is getting targeted heavily by Sam Howell. They're getting him the ball, as we saw on Thanksgiving. He put up the most receiving yards in that game for the Commanders, and he went over 100 yards. Antonio Gibson is also going to be a weapon out of the backfield in the pass-catching game. I believe the Dolphins are not great against pass-catching running backs, which is why I think Gibson and Robinson have the potential to rack up points. In a negative game script, I expect them to be trailing a lot. Logan Thomas also is a sleeper this week for me. They're not great against the tight end either. And then a bust slash maybe fringe starter. I'm not loving Sam Howell, but in the negative game script, if you have to start Sam Howell with this by Mageddon, I don't mind it. But I have him as a bust this week because I think he's going to throw a couple interceptions, but it could be a good game for him because they're going to be trailing. So you never know. Those trailing games do rack up points quick, and Sam Howell leads the league in passing yards. What about you, Tanner? Who do you have in this game?
Yes. So my start of the week at quarterback is going to be Tua. I know he was not good on Black Friday, and he has not been good in two of his last three games. However, he gets the Commanders this weekend, and they have allowed 20 or more points to 8 quarterbacks, including Tyrod Taylor and Tommy DeVito. So it is a smash spot for Tua. I have him as a top 5 quarterback this week. If I'm being completely honest, I have him as my number 2, maybe number 3 quarterback this week behind Dak Prescott, Jalen Hurts, Tua. I think you can kind of all put those guys in the top 3 this week.
Yeah, we saw from Dak last night. He went nuclear.
Mm-hmm.
And then Dolphins at Commanders. So let's go on to the Broncos at the Texans in Houston, Texas. This game looks to be high scoring. Maybe. We'll see how they perform on offense, Denver-wise. And then the Broncos' defense has been pretty stout as of late. I've got Russell Wilson, C.J. Stroud as must-start quarterbacks this week, especially with the situation of everything. And then you're going to start Javonte, Devin Singletary. I think you're also starting Tank Dell, Nico Collins, Cortland Sutton, Dalton Schultz. I would sit the Texans defense. I would sit Dameon Pierce. Dameon Pierce has been inconsistent all year, hasn't shown us anything. Honestly, he shouldn't even be rostered in my opinion. And then a couple sleepers I like. Samaje Perine, he is actually, I believe, I don't know after their I don't know after last week, but I think prior to last week he was the leading running back pass catcher in receiving yards, even above Christian McCaffrey, which is crazy to me. Samaje Perine's catching the ball a lot, which is good for PPR leagues. I think the Broncos defense is also a sleeper this week. They can put some pressure on Stroud and make him uncomfortable, and they've been forcing a lot of turnovers this year, which is what you want from your defense. Tanner, who do you like in this game and why?
Yes. So touching back, I'm going to touch back on CJ Stroud and Russell Wilson again in just a moment, but I want to go ahead and get to Devin Singletary as an RB2. I think he's a must start given the matchup and the workload he's been getting. He had 6 catches last week. He's playing the Broncos, who have given up the most points to running backs this season. They're giving up 5.78 yards per carry and the 7th most receiving yards to the position. Another guy I think is a must start is going to be Dalton Schultz. Now, he hasn't been practicing with the hamstring injury. He didn't practice again today, which kind of has me a little worried, but let's hold on until Friday and see what the injury report's looking like going into the weekend. Schultz has got the Broncos. They've given up 6 touchdowns, the 4th highest catch rate, and the most points to tight ends. So, like I said, keep an eye on the injury report, but if he's able to play through it, I really think that this is a smash spot for him.
You know what?
Yeah,
Breaking
go ahead.
news. 13 minutes ago, breaking news. The Houston Texans will be without they will be without tight end Dalton Schultz on Sunday against the Broncos as of 13 minutes ago via Texans Daily on SI.com.
All right. Breaking news, that's for sure. Well, with that, I think that just gives us more emphasis on Pat Freiermuth. I don't know if we mentioned him in the Steelers game.
Yep.
I think I have him around tight end 6. Jawan Johnson around tight end 10. I think Taysom Hill around tight end 7. Can't imagine a league that you're in where Trey McBride's still available.
Yep.
Looking at CJ Stroud, though, I did want to talk about CJ Stroud. The Broncos have given up over 17 points per game to the quarterback position pretty much every time they're on the road. They just do not look like the same team on the road as they do at home. Russell Wilson, I think he's in a smash spot as well. I know we had a mailbag question about that. Maybe we talk about that a little bit later. But Russell Wilson, the Broncos have just been on fire. They've won 5 straight. They kind of remind me of the Lions from last year. You know, Dan Campbell was talking about that grit. You got to have that grit factor.
Yep.
And, I mean, we know how much football means to Dan Campbell.
Mm-hmm.
Ask the guy, what does football mean to you? He's crying over there.
Yeah.
But, no, something I wanted to touch on. I can't get my notes to load right now. This is just literally the worst timing ever. But,
well, you know,
yeah.
I believe Sean Payton did reference that Dan Campbell speech from last year that he gave the Lions when they started off slow and then they turned it around and won a lot of games and almost made the playoffs. And I think that's what we're seeing out of the Broncos. Now it's going to be harder for them. They're going to have to win this game if they want to increase their playoff chances, because this is a team that they are competing with for the final playoff spot in the AFC. And the AFC is, as a conference, is so tight right now. It could go any way, and some of these games like this one will go a long way in deciding who makes it at the end of the year via tiebreaker or whatever. So I think this is a big game for both teams. The Texans being at home definitely helps them a little bit more. But, yeah, Denver's not to be slept on in this matchup. I think it's going to be a very, very close game, and I think it could be high scoring.
Yeah, I know Russell Wilson's numbers have not been great in recent weeks, but he's still giving fantasy fans a decent floor. I really like his ceiling this week, too. He faces a Texans defense that's allowed an average of 297.5 passing yards and 21.3 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks in the last 4 weeks. I think Wilson is a great buy replacement for managers if you need one. Touching back on CJ Stroud, same thing can be said if you need one. He showed it last week when he had 30.9 points in a loss to the Jaguars. He definitely should remain in lineups this week against the Broncos, who have given up 17-plus points to 3 quarterbacks on the road this season. With 6 teams on a bye, I think you could feel pretty confident about these guys' floor, at the very least, to start them in Week 13.
Yeah, and I like CJ Stroud over like Kyler Murray and some of those guys that are like on the fringe QB. I have CJ Stroud ahead of like Kyler and Herbert and Jared
I think
Goff.
the only guy I don't have CJ Stroud over who would be on the fringe would be Brock Purdy. I have Brock Purdy just a little bit ahead of CJ Stroud this week. Highly doubt Trevor Lawrence is available in any leagues. But the next step down from Stroud would be Russell Wilson, Sam Howell, Gardner Minshew, then Jordan Love in that order.
Yep. I think you can start everyone pretty confidently in this game, except make sure Dalton Schultz is on your bench because we just got that news in. He's
doing that right now.
Officially out. He is officially out, so not great for CJ Stroud, but he still got Tank Dell, Nico Collins. He's got a lot of weapons there, so I think he'll be just fine. Let's move on to Tampa Bay, Florida. The Panthers at the Buccaneers, a divisional matchup in the worst division in football, and the worst team in football is taking on the Buccaneers. There's really no one that makes me say, "Oh, I want to start." Oh, yeah. Well, you guys are trying to steal the number one pick from them.
Thank you, Chad Ryland, for
Who
missing
can
a
tank the
35-yard field goal to send it to overtime.
Who can tank the best? That's the question. Adam Thielen's really the only one on the Panthers that I want to start this week, and I really only want to start him as a flex. This is a good matchup for pass catchers against the Buccaneers, but I think it's going to be a tough matchup for him. I'm pretty sure he had a good matchup last week, and he dudded in that one, so it's tough for me to start him. I would definitely start other wide receivers over him. That's why he's a flex for me, wide receiver 3. But for Tampa Bay, my start of the week is going to be Rachaad White. I think he's going to explode this week, and you have to lock him into your lineup. He's been looking really good this year, and he feasts off of good matchups. This is one of the best matchups in the NFL for running backs. So fire up Rachaad White this week. I know most of you have him locked in as a starter, which he should be. Another guy I like is Mike Evans and the Bucs defense. I think the Bucs defense will create problems in the run game with Big Vita Vea up front, and I think they'll be fine defending the pass. But yeah, you got to start Mike Evans with how he's done this year. I'm just a little worried because the Panthers' pass defense is pretty decent. Definitely sit Bryce Young and Miles Sanders. Don't see them really performing that well. I'd also sit Chuba Hubbard. I think he's going to bust this week. Panthers defense is definitely a sleeper for me, but I think there are probably better options out there unless you're in a super deep league. Another sleeper I've got is Baker Mayfield. I think he can do decent against this Panthers defense, but it's going to be tough, and I think you should definitely sit Cade Otton because there are better tight ends like we were talking about, Freiermuth, even Taysom Hill if he's somehow out there, Juwan Johnson. There are plenty.
Njoku,
Yeah, Njoku. Also,
Logan Thomas.
Logan Thomas. Yeah, I was about to say I like him a lot this week. I think he should be started over Cade Otton. Cade Otton should be on your bench. So Tanner, who do you like in this matchup with the over/under at 37? So not a lot of points expected by the books in this game.
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head. Rachaad White, he had his first 100-yard game of the season in the loss last week. He rushed 15 times for 100 yards and secured both of his targets for 10 yards in the loss. He finally found some consistent running room after coming into the game with an average of 3.3 yards per carry. He had a game-long 38-yard run, helping boost up his tally considerably. He's only his second year in the league. He was less involved in the passing game than usual. His receiving yardage tied a season low, but White more than made up for it with his work on the ground. This week against the Panthers, I really like his matchup. I could see them getting out into a lead and kind of just running down the clock from there.
Yep. Yeah. I think
I seriously, no exaggeration, have him as like RB2, even as high as RB2 this week. Yeah. I think he's going to eat.
McCaffrey's taking that RB1 slot.
Yes, and for you guys out there, the gap between running back 1 on the season to running back 2 is bigger than the gap between running back 2 to running back 25. Just shows you how good McCaffrey's been. And I have Rachaad White, the best running back in the league this week besides Christian McCaffrey.
Yep, I like it a lot. That's why he's my start of the week, which, I mean, obviously everyone's starting him this week. But, yeah, he should be locked and loaded in your lineup. Speaking of Christian McCaffrey, let's move on to Philly. Niners at the Eagles in Philly. This is probably the matchup of the week.
Game of the year.
Yep, top 2 teams in the NFC Championship rematch. Let's hope Brock Purdy stays healthy for the full game this year, so we don't have to hear the Niners complain how they didn't have a quarterback. But I think you're locking and loading everyone to start pretty much. Brock Purdy, CMC, Ayuk, I like as a top receiver. I think he could be the top scoring wide receiver this week. Deebo Samuel should probably be locked into your lineup this week along with George Kittle. And I like the Niners defense. I do not like the Eagles defense, though. I think you should sit them. Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, Devontae Smith. You're probably also starting DeAndre Swift, which I'm not a huge fan of. I think he could bust this week. Very bad matchup for him, but I think AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, Jalen Hurts, all locks. I think a sleeper could be Olamide Zaccheaus. We saw him get into the end zone last week, I believe, and I think he should do really well again. So he is a sleeper for me. Definitely sit Kenneth Gainwell. I'm not a fan of the Eagles running backs this week, although they could do some damage in the pass game. I think this game is pretty high scoring. The Eagles defense has not looked great against opposing offenses this year, especially
Mm-mm.
against the pass. So Brock Purdy's
Mm-hmm.
pretty high on my start list. What about you, Tanner?
Yes, just touching on Brock Purdy. I get that the Eagles are the best team in the NFL right now, but I really like his matchup against the Eagles. Their defense is not great against the pass, like you said. They've allowed quarterbacks to score in 19 plus points 6 times this season. Just so you guys know out there, we are going off of the standard 4 points per passing touchdown. So start Brock Purdy in what should be game of the year. Now, my favorite other player on the 49ers, actually, I'd probably put him above Brock Purdy, would be Brandon Ayuk. Um, the Eagles have allowed 12 touchdowns to perimeter wide receivers and the most fantasy points to perimeter wide receivers in the NFL. So, without a doubt, you're starting Brandon Ayuk this weekend. We know how inconsistent Deebo Samuel has been. If you listen to this podcast when it was around draft time, we told you guys don't
We
go
did.
after Deebo Samuel's ADP. Ayuk's the real number one in this offense. You can get him
Yep.
many, many rounds later. And if you were listening, well, then you're probably going to the fantasy playoffs like we are.
Yeah. Yep. That was a key take that we had. I can find that tweet and I will repost it because that was a great call by us. Yeah, Debo. I mean, see, the thing about Debo is he's very inconsistent, but he's gonna want to prove himself this week. So we're gonna probably see them try and get him touches. But we all know who the wide receiver one is in this offense. I just
We do.
don't think people want to admit it. It's Brandon Ayuk,
And
and
crazy prediction, George Kittle is going to have something he's going to show on his
oh
T-shirt
yeah,
after they score. I mean, the Eagles and the Niners have had this game on their schedule all year long.
yeah, it's been circled on the
It
calendar.
might as well be a revenge game for the 49ers. We could cast that narrative on all of them.
Yeah, the Niners are actually favored in this matchup, which is crazy with it being in Philly. And I know a lot of people are going to want to take the Eagles with the spread, but be a little careful about that. Yeah, I think this is going to be a great game, like you said, game of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, let's move on to a meh game. Over under 39.5. Rams are favored by 4 points. The Browns are going into Inglewood, California to take on the Rams. And Joe Flacco, as of about 45 minutes ago, was named the starting quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. And that's very interesting that they brought him in, but I think he's a better passer than anyone they have on their roster besides Deshaun Watson. Um, he loves to feed the big time pass catchers, so I think Amari Cooper should do well. I think David Njoku is going to get a lot of targets. We've seen him go off on targets the last couple weeks. I think you got to start both of them, especially with where we're at for the positions this week. I think the Browns defense is startable, but it really depends on the injuries on Myles Garrett, and I believe their number one corner Denzel Ward is hurt. So be a little cautious about starting the Browns defense, but I think they have the potential to do well any week just because of Myles Garrett and the really havoc that he wreaks on opposing quarterbacks. Also, surprisingly, I've got Cooper Kupp as a sit this week. I do not like starting him. I'm not starting him myself, but I do like Kyron Williams. And I kind of like Puka. I think you may be forced to start Puka. I definitely like Puka over Cooper Kupp, and Puka gets upgraded if the Browns' injuries are significant enough and they do miss time, like Denzel Ward is out or Myles Garrett
Myles
is out.
Garrett, and then one of their safeties as well is has not been practicing.
I'll look into that. But Tanner, who do you like? Who do you hate in this matchup? I think we got to sit Joe Flacco. No one can start him, but as far as the other positions, what are you thinking?
What do you mean? Joe Flacco is elite and he's Super Bowl MVP. Come on,
Right,
he's
he's like
got to start.
40 years old. Come on now.
And I mean, even I think when he was on the Jets, like I just remember, I don't know, I'm sure their offensive line was in shambles, but I just remember him just dumping it, dumping it, dumping it. I don't really remember him going down the field to his number one there. But looking at the starts in this games, yeah, you hit it. Kyron Williams is a must start. We all saw the game he put up last week, and that was just ridiculous. A guy I like, David Njoku. You said he's been really good the last couple of weeks. Actually, he's been really good the last 6 straight games. He's had at least 10 plus points. I'm not sure, before I wasn't sure what the quarterback situation was going to be in Cleveland this week. Now we know it's going to be Joe Flacco. But regardless, the targets have been there, and the Rams have allowed the 6th most fantasy points to tight ends. A sit I have is actually I put Cooper Kupp and Puka Nakua on there. Reasons why. Now, I understand with 6 teams on a bye and some really good wide receivers missing this week, I get that it's going to be even harder to bench him. But he's only had 2 good games all season, and he is not healthy right now. Last week, after he caught his first pass, immediately he goes over to the sidelines. Doctors are looking at his ankle and stuff. Though he hadn't been listed on the injury report, I saw him limping around a lot after their first possession last week. I expect this game to be one of those nasty, low-scoring games. Really not a good
Hmm.
game script for fantasy football managers, even with the Browns' defense being banged up as it is, like we mentioned. And we will know more later this week as we see the injury report on the Browns' defense. But ultimately, this just comes down to Cooper Kupp's health and how bad the Browns' offense is. I could see the Rams just running the ball down their throat, as we saw last week against the Cardinals. I'm also worried about Puka Nakua. He's only had 1 good game since Cooper Kupp returned, and part of that was because Cooper Kupp got hurt during the game. Every other game, Puka Nakua has been scoring single-digit points. And he's got the Browns this week, who have allowed the fewest points to wide receivers. So tough matchup. I believe it's going to be tough game script. And I just really don't like Stafford, Kupp, or Puka. Another pass catcher for the Rams that I'm not high on this week is going to be Tyler Higbee. The yardage was low last week for Higbee, but he did have 2 touchdowns, and that is not going to happen against Cleveland. Only 1 tight end, and that was Mark Andrews, had scored more than 7.8 points against Cleveland this year.
Yep. I got Higbee as a bust this week. And I also think Jerome Ford, like you were saying, Joe Flacco likes to dump it down. He could benefit from that. He's a flex play at best, honestly. It's tough to not play him, especially with how light the running back position is this week. So if you have to play Jerome Ford, I don't mind it. He could get a lot of PPR points, but like Tanner's saying, the over-under is 39.5. I don't think we see a lot of scoring in this game. It could be a defensive battle, low-scoring game. Also, I'd like to note I pulled up the Browns injury report. So Myles Garrett hasn't practiced the past 2 days, Wednesday and Thursday. It says not injury-related, rest for the shoulder, but I think he's playing. I think he's playing.
Mm.
Now, Denzel Ward, their star corner, has not practiced due to his shoulder injury. And then the safety that you were talking about, Juan Thornhill, did not practice on Wednesday, but did practice in a limited capacity on Thursday. So I think that bodes well for Thornhill going in to that game. But Denzel Ward not practicing back-to-back days. I do not have a status on their practice as of today, but once we get that, I think that will make our decision on the Browns defense being at full strength or not a lot easier to kind of figure that out as the weekend comes over the next few
Yes,
days.
and on Jerome Ford, I think it's worth noting that the LA Rams defense has allowed just 5 total touchdowns to running backs
Yeah.
this season. So I get that it might be hard to bench Jerome Ford, but I would really just lower your expectations.
Yep.
And I think the same things could be said about James Conner, who we already talked about. Hard to sit, especially during Bye Mageddon, but
Yeah.
just lower your expectations.
The thing about Jerome Ford, though, is he's gotten you a solid floor over the last couple weeks. I believe he's had a floor of at least 11 PPR points, which isn't great.
11.9.
Yeah, 11.9, that's it. Isn't great by any means as an RB1, but as an RB2 as a floor, that's not bad. And I think he can get there this week as a flex fringe RB2 play, just because I think, like you said, Joe Flacco may be dumping the ball down to him a little bit. And he is an explosive runner, which is fun to watch. But yeah, like you said, definitely temper expectations. He's not scoring multiple touchdowns. He's not going to put out some crazy performance, I don't think, but you never know. But I would proceed with caution with him. Like,
At least you know his floor. The last 3 weeks in a row, he scored exactly 11.9 fantasy points. So, I mean, that's his floor, but that's just 5 total touchdowns given up by the Rams defense this season. So, I
would
don't
you
know that he'll find
start?
the end
All
zone.
right, Tanner, here's a good one. Would you start Devon Achane or Jerome Ford this week?
HN.
Yeah, I think I would too.
HN.
I think that one's pretty.
Mostert's really just losing value for me, if I'm being honest. I'm not as high on him.
He's not an explosive runner like Achane. He's not young like Achane. That's, I think, why. And I think McDaniel's going to turn to Achane this week, especially if they get a little ahead. I think he's going to run him a little bit, try and get him in the flow of the game, try and get him back up to speed because he's been injured. So hopefully we do see the Achane that we saw earlier this year. Fun to watch.
Against Denver, yes.
Oh, yeah. And they're, yeah.
And, I mean, even Jeff Wilson had 11 rushes last week for 56 yards, 3 catches for 17 yards on 3 targets. I mean, I don't know. Mostert's losing value.
Yeah. He's being overtaken by the younger backs in that backfield for sure as the season comes.
Actually, which we mentioned when we were talking about waiver additions. We literally mentioned Mostert's age, how we were worried about that. And, I mean, if you guys have been listening, we'll see you in the Super Bowl.
Yep. We will. And speaking of the Super Bowl, the defending champions Chiefs are going into Lambeau Field at the Packers. This is the Sunday Night Football matchup, and I have a bold prediction on this game. I think the Packers could beat the Chiefs in Lambeau. Bold prediction.
Why is that?
Oh, Jordan Love's been playing out of his mind recently. We saw last week he just beat the Lions, who beat the Chiefs in Kansas City to start the year. I wouldn't put it past him to beat the Chiefs at home. You know, Packers are in their home environment where they're comfortable. I like Jordan Love a lot this week. Now they're without one of their best weapons in Aaron Jones, but he has a lot of really good wide receivers, and I think his wide receivers, they're starting to get on the same page. And that Packers defense, if they are fully healthy, I don't know if Jair Alexander's still hurt or not, but if they're healthier, I think Mahomes and that Chiefs offense struggles to get going. But I don't think the Packers are going to win. I am projecting the Chiefs to win, but bold prediction, I think I wouldn't put it past the Packers to upset in Sunday Night Football. I think you got to start all the big names like Mahomes, Pacheco, Kelsey.
Pacheco, yes. Kelsey every week.
Pacheco is one of the best starts this week, I think. The Packers are not great against the run, and Pacheco has been really good as of late. And I believe he scored 2 touchdowns last week, which is really good. I think also Jordan Love, you got to lock him in as a starter, but I would put him behind guys like Russell Wilson and Gardner Minshew just slightly. But he's in that top 15 QB range.
So I actually have a different opinion on the Jordan Love thing. I know he's been really good. The last 2 weeks.
Yep.
But like you said, he's playing the Chiefs this week. I know he's at home, but quarterbacks are only averaging 12.3 points per game against the Chiefs defense, which is very good for the Chiefs defense. And I believe this week, even though we're in By-Mageddon, unless you're in a super flex league, I would fade Jordan Love. That's just me personally. Chiefs defense has been really good against quarterbacks.
Yeah, Jordan Love's been on a tear as of late. I am starting him in one of my leagues just because I have confidence in him, and he has a higher potential, in my opinion, to boom than, like, say, Russell Wilson or maybe Derek Carr. But Russell Wilson, I think, gives you a solid floor. So That's why I would put Russell Wilson
Hmm.
ahead as of right now. But I like Jordan Love a lot. I think he can do it. Now, he beat up on a pretty bad Lions defense last week. The Lions defense has not been good all year. They really aren't good, and the Chiefs are way better. Some sleepers I do have are Justin Watson of the Chiefs. He's looked really good. He's been one of Mahomes' favorite targets, other than Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce. He's been on the Chiefs for a while, so Mahomes does trust him a lot. I also have a bust in A.J. Dillon. I don't think A.J. Dillon does really anything this week. I think the Chiefs' defense can contain him pretty well. It's just going to be how can the Chiefs hold up against these wide receivers in Jaden Reed, Christian Watson, Romeo Dobbs. Um, I think it's going to be a good Sunday night football game, but yeah, I think the Chiefs do end up winning this game. You have any
Mahomes
thoughts?
is no, just Mahomes' first ever game as a starter in Lambeau, so that should be fun.
Oh, yeah, because I think the past games he was
I think Alex
either
Smith was still there. Yeah, it's probably
yeah,
like eight years ago.
Aaron
Honestly,
Rodgers, yeah. Aaron Rodgers and Mahomes, I don't think ever played in a matchup because
I
I
don't
think
think
either
so.
one has either been hurt or had illness or something. So they've never matched up. So that's going to be an interesting game. Let's see how Mahomes does in Lambeau Sunday night. Let's go to the last game of the week. The Bengals at the Jaguars. Bengals do not have Joe Burrow in this matchup. He's out on IR. And Jake Browning is taking the starting QB for the second week in a row, I think. Um, Jamar Chase, I think you have to start him. He was a first round pick for you. He can go off. As long as Jake Browning can get him the ball, I think he has the potential to go off. As for Jacksonville, some starts I like. Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, must starts. Calvin Ridley, I think you got to start him. He also, to note, Calvin Ridley performs so much better with Zay Jones on the field, and Zay Jones is going to be active. So I think they use Zay Jones as a decoy for Calvin Ridley, and that really helps him. I also think you
Hmm.
got to start Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, and I do like the Jags defense because they have a potential to apply pressure. We saw it last week when they applied a lot of pressure on C.J. Stroud at the end of the game. Jake Browning is by no means a C.J. Stroud or a good quarterback in the NFL. He's not
He's
great.
so bad. He's actually so bad. I don't even
He's
think he can throw the ball 15, 25 yards down the field. I'm just so sick of watching that guy at quarterback.
yeah,
Bengals fans, let us know what you think because
for
that guy
real.
needs to go to the. When the XFL comes back, Jake Browning, congratulations. You have a starting quarterback job.
Yeah, you should have gone and got Joe Flacco at this rate.
Hmm.
At least Joe Flacco can throw it to Jamar Chase and maybe T. Higgins. I've heard T. Higgins is trending towards coming back this week, although I wouldn't be
Uh-uh.
excited to start him at all, especially with Jake Browning at quarterback. So I have him as a bust if he does come back. Some sleepers I think are the Bengals defense. Bengals defense could apply some pressure on Trevor Lawrence, who hasn't been great this year, but he had his best performance of the year last week. So maybe he builds off that. Another sleeper I've got is Dearness Johnson, the backup running back for the Jags. I think he could do well. The Bengals are not great at defending the run. I think this is a Travis Etienne explosion game. I could see him putting up RB3 on the week behind McCaffrey and Rashad White. I wouldn't doubt it. I could see him even going for the RB1 position, but I think Travis Etienne is in a prime position to explode this week, and that's why I think Dearness Johnson could also have some value in deeper leagues. What about you, Tanner? What do you think about this Monday night matchup?
I think if there's a defense to start, I'm going to lean towards the Jaguars. Going back on ETN, he remained limited at practice today on Friday.
Yep.
Now, they don't play until Monday night, so we're going to get our final injury report from these teams tomorrow. So that's worth noting. Also worth noting, ETN left the game early in Week 12 over Houston with the chest/rib injury. So monitor that. If
Mm-hmm.
he plays, however, though, we know he's a must start.
Yep.
Now, a guy I really don't like is Joe Mixon. I did not see him look the same without Joe Burrow last week. I was expecting to see an increase in touches. Thought maybe they would lean on him a little bit more without Burrow, but that just wasn't the case. It was a very unproductive day for Mixon. He had 10 total touches, 8 carries. and he really saved his day with the 44 receiving yards last week against Pittsburgh.
Oh yeah.
Maybe they get a little more creative and throw to him more on Monday night, but I think Mixon is in trouble for the rest of the year,
Yep.
and really you could say that about the entire Bengals offense. Going back to T. Higgins, if you're in a 10-man league, I actually think T. Higgins is droppable. I think Jake Browning's been that bad. Brady, I actually texted you earlier in the week, maybe last week, about how thinking Jamar Chase is even hitting wide receiver 3 value. Now, this week I do have him wide receiver 2. I agree with you, but I mean, how crazy is that? A guy that was going top 3 overall is now in wide receiver 3, wide receiver 2 territory. I mean, he's one of the guys I can't see you benching,
It's the
but
Jake Browning
again,
effect.
just temper expectations for sure. But yes, Joe Mixon, sit him if you can. However, there's not going to be guys that you're going to pick up on waivers this week that you're going to want to start over them. Just a guy to avoid if you have depth on your roster.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see what the over-under on Mixon's rushing yards are. Last week you said 8 carries, 16 yards, 2 yards per carry. The Jags have only allowed 2 rushing touchdowns against running backs this year. So I don't see Joe Mixon getting into the end zone. And they also haven't allowed over 80 rushing yards, but to 2 backfields. Those backfields, San Francisco, great run scheme by Kyle Shanahan, and Atlanta, great run scheme by Arthur Smith. And not to mention, those 2 backfields have 2 of the best running backs in the NFL in Bijan Robinson and Christian McCaffrey. So yeah, you should be worried about Joe Mixon. I think you got to sit him. I don't see the appeal in starting him. There's really no upside there.
There is none.
Yeah, once Joe Burrow went down, this whole Bengals team just tanked in fantasy value, and it was tough to see. But that is the final matchup for this week. We have a lot of buys this week. I'm going to post my top starts, sits, busts, sleepers, and some weather to monitor tomorrow with the Week 13 matchup analysis. Tanner, do you have anything else you want to add for the viewers?
Yes, I think we should just recap positions as quickly as we can.
All right.
I'll start off with the quarterback and then pass it over to you, so on and so forth.
Yep.
We covered Russell Wilson. So Brock Purdy, for some reason he's not rostered. Go get that guy.
Yeah.
After that, Jared Goff. He's not that good on the road. I know you said you were a little bit worried about him, especially after last week. Only benefit is he's playing in a dome, which we know he's very familiar with at Ford Field. I like Russell. I'd have Russell Wilson at the top of my pickup, and then probably Sam Howell, then Gardner Minshew, then Jordan Love. Then after that, if you don't want to lean on somebody and you want to pick somebody up, I'd probably say Derek Carr would be the last one I add.
Yeah.
And then
Especially if
Kenny
Olave.
Pickett after that.
Yeah. Yeah. Derek Carr, especially if Olave is back. I think that just upgrades his value a lot. Yeah, Kenny Pickett is like that fringe QB 15, 14 that could push his way to the top 12 this week if he has a good passing performance. But like we both said, we expect that running game in Pittsburgh to be there at their best, and that's what I
Bread and
think
butter.
they're going to ride. Yeah, that's the bread and butter for the Pittsburgh offense. They have 2 great running backs. Both of them have been really good, actually. So, yeah.
Najee is just running angry.
Yeah, he's pissed off. He's finally happy that Matt Canada's out of there. A couple
Deontay Johnson's happy, and we know Chris Boswell's happy.
Oh, yeah. Another QB that I like is, I think Baker maybe have the potential, but I mean, Minshew's definitely, Minshew and Russ are the 2 that I think have the potential to go into the top 10 this week and push Herbert out of the top 10. Let's go into running backs. Like we said, you're definitely starting Rachaad White and Alvin Kamara, Bijan Robinson, Isaiah Pacheco for sure. Definitely Ramondre Stevenson and Isaiah Pacheco are 2 of my favorites this week. I think they're going to do really good. And a couple guys on the fringe of like an RB2 that I like over Joe Mixon would be Javonte Williams, even Brian Robinson, just because he's going to get a lot of passes. So, yeah. What about you, Tanner?
Yeah, running back. I think Zach Moss, like I mentioned before, I have him a top 10 running back this week. Even like him over Austin Eckler this week, which I would have never predicted myself saying at the start of the season. Devin Singletary is worth a look at RB2. I know we mentioned him.
Yep.
Now, I think we learned today that Aaron Jones is not going to play. So if you
Yep.
have a little bit of A.J. Dillon on your team, maybe look for him. But
Yeah, I'm not
yeah,
a huge fan of him, but
if you're in a deeper league, maybe Samaje Perine or Chuba Hubbard if you'd
yep.
like.
P. Ryan for sure. I like him in the pass catching role he's in.
What about going over to the wide receiver position, covering more of the guys that would be streamers this week? Who do you like?
Yeah, so streamer wise, if for some reason Rashee Rice is available, I like him. Josh Downs, I like him a lot. Another couple guys I like, Jaden Reed. I liked Brandon Cooks. I had him as a sleeper. I started him over Marquise Brown last night, and it paid off. And I also do like. I'm going deep. A deeper sleeper, Curtis Samuel of the Washington Commanders. I think him and Demario Douglas are two of my favorite ones that are probably available for you guys out there. But you got to monitor Demario Douglas's status for that Patriots game. I know he has a concussion, I believe, so definitely something to monitor, but I have full confidence in him, and I think he can do really well if he does, in fact, play for the Patriots. What about you, Tanner? You have any sleeper wide receivers you like?
Rashee Rice, I definitely like a lot this week. I'm too nervous to start Christian Watson. If you're really desperate, you could go get a guy like Greg Dortch for Arizona.
Especially if Marquise Brown is out because he's been injured this whole week. So that's something to monitor.
So those would be guys that I would mention that I think were getting added in a lot of leagues lately that may be out there for you. But we're not going to spend time talking about guys like Tyreek Hill and Keenan Allen and
Yeah, they're
Amon-Ra
locked
St.
in.
Brown. And
Yeah,
I
they
mean, I
should
know
be
I
locked
mentioned
in.
Michael Pittman earlier in the episode, and no, not even joking. I think he's close to top 5 wide receiver
Yeah.
this week, probably number 5. Mike Evans, like you mentioned earlier, I'd probably have him around wide receiver 7 on the week. Tank Dell, we're starting every week. But yeah, no, of the guys that are getting picked up, Rashee Rice, probably top of my list. Then I'd probably follow that up with Brandon Cooks. I know he already played, but could have given that shout out as well. Curtis
Yeah.
Samuel, you mentioned him, I really like. After Curtis Samuel, probably Christian Watson. And then after that, probably Greg Dortch.
Okay.
What about the tight end position for you, Brady?
Yeah, streamer wise at the tight end position, I think you got to look at Logan Thomas if he's out there. I think you also got to look at Juwan Johnson. Juwan Johnson, we mentioned him a lot earlier. I think he has the potential to do really well, especially if there's no Olave. But even if there is Olave there, the Lions are not great against tight ends. So I would definitely go for Juwan Johnson if you're in a deep league and there's no one out there, you need a tight end this week. I also like Freiermuth. I know he is available in a lot of leagues. He's gotten picked up probably on waiver wires this week, so he may not be available for you. But if he is, I like him as a top 5 potentially tight end this week, and also some deeper tight ends. I do like maybe Hunter Henry. Maybe they get him the ball in the end zone. It's just a really deep tight end, and also Chigo Konku. He's seen his volume uptick, but yeah, Juwan Johnson is probably the top of my list as far as streamers go this week for the tight end position. What about you?
So I actually have Jawan at number 2 behind Pat Freiermuth. Muth is coming off a career day. And I mean, like I said earlier in the episode, all we can go off of with the Steelers offense is what we've seen since Matt Canada left. Freiermuth getting a lot more volume. Second, I'd go Jawan Johnson. Third, I'd probably go Logan Thomas. And I'm not a big fan of Otten, not a big fan of Pitts, Everett, not a big fan, Higbee, not a big fan, Johnny Smith, not a fan. So probably either Tyler Conklin maybe or
Yep.
Hunter Henry, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah. There's not a lot of tight ends once it gets past like 12, tight end 12. It is really thin out there this week with a lot of teams on bye. And defenses, I'm going to go over a couple defenses I like this week. I do like the Colts defense. I think they can apply pressure. And another sleeper defense is going to be the Chargers, just because I'm sorry, Tanner, but the Patriots offense is horrible. I think we can both agree on that end, especially if there's no Demario Douglas. But I think Ramondre Stevenson is going to give this Chargers defense trouble, so they're definitely lower. A lot of defenses that are out there could be the Falcons. I saw them available in almost every league of mine. So I do like the Falcons because I think that Jets game is going to be low scoring and Tim Boyle is pretty bad. If the Jags defense is somehow out there, please pick them up. Jake Browning is horrible, but I don't think they're going to be out there for you. Yeah, I kind of like the Colts the best. Or, sorry, the Falcons the best. Colts probably the second best just because Will Levis, he's still a rookie. This Colts defense can apply pressure. We'll see how that turns out. What about you, Tanner? Do you have any defenses that stand out to you as far as streamers this week?
Yeah, like you said, number one would have to be the Jaguars. And then I know you mentioned the Dolphins earlier in the episode. They're my defense number two on the week. So I definitely go with them. I do like the Jets this week. Like I said, they locked down the perimeter.
Yep.
I do like the Falcons as well on the other side of the field. I think that's going to be a low-scoring game. I mentioned game script in the Browns or the Rams game, so I do like the Rams. I have them. I have the Rams just outside of my top 10 of defenses. To your point, I like the Chargers more than I like the Rams, but just to clear up the confusion, if I was to put it in order, I would say Jaguars 1, Jets 2, Falcons 3, Buccaneers 4, Chargers 5, Rams 6, and Colts 7 in order of streamable defenses this week.
Yeah,
going over to the kicker position, Brady, do you have any kickers that you would like to let the viewers know about?
I do like Groupie if he's available. Blake Groupie.
Mm-hmm.
I picked him up actually in one of my leagues. He does have an injury designation. I was about to
He
check
does.
what that is.
So it's his groin. He practiced in a limited capacity on
Okay.
Thursday. Groupie has had practice restrictions so far this week due to a right groin injury. So it's in his kicking leg. But this guy's he's very good. He's very good. And he may enter the week with a designation for the game, which does scare me because we've seen this situation before. I believe it was last year in the playoffs. Kymie Fairbairn got hurt, and all of a sudden the Houston Texans are going for 2 on every single touchdown. So I don't know. Injury designations really scare me with kickers, but Groupie would be top of my list if he's out there for some reason. But,
I also like Jason Sanders this week. Believe the Commanders are allowing the most points to kickers. And this Dolphins offense, I believe this is going to be like a get-right game for them and just absolutely run up the score, go for that 70-pointer like they did against Denver. Maybe the Commanders' defense steps it up after their firing of the DC, but I do like Jason Sanders a lot this week, and I saw him available in a lot of my leagues, so he may be out there for you guys. Another guy I think we could go back to, even though we had a dud last week, is Matt Prater. Cardinals,
0.
Cardinals could fizz out a lot in this by the Steelers defense in the red zone or close to the red zone. So it could be some good kicking for Prater, but I would avoid Prater, to be honest. But he's a little lower on my list. And if that Steelers defense puts it on the Cardinals, if they don't have Marquise Brown, it could make it a little tougher. But he could possibly do something, but I'm not confident in it. I'm more confident in Jason Sanders because I know the Dolphins are going to score points.
Yes.
As far as other kickers go, I'm a little lower on Jake Moody this week. I actually dropped him for Groupie, actually, I believe. Or maybe it was someone else I dropped. But I think I dropped Moody for... I can't remember. I dropped him for someone that had a better matchup, and he hasn't really done great. He has barely any games over 10 fantasy points. He's been getting a lot of single-digit fantasy points, so I think you can sit him if you need to. But I mean, the Eagles are good against kickers, which I think is because they're allowing a lot of touchdowns and not a lot of field goals. So that's something to monitor, especially with, his last four, he's had 6, 8, 8, 8, and then his fifth, he had 10, and then his sixth, he had 9. So he hasn't scored a lot of fantasy points over 10 once out of the last 6 games. Not great on Jake Moody. What about you, Tanner? Any kickers stand out to you? Any kickers you want to avoid this week?
Kicker that stands out. He had a bye in week 11, so there's a chance that he's out there, and that's Younghoe Koo.
Oh, yeah.
We've seen 3 kickers in a row versus the Jets. Daniel Carlson, Tyler Bass, and Jason Sanders have scored at least 10 fantasy points against the Jets. They've converted 9 of 9 field goals and 7 of 8 PATs. I know Koo struggled recently with just 2 field goals and 5 PATs in his past 2 games against the Cardinals and against the Saints. But I really like him to rebound in this spot. Brady, I know you must have seen that statistic this week about him passing up Justin Tucker. He now has the highest field goal percentage of any kicker in NFL history, minimum 100 attempts at 90% of his kicks. Second guy I think that would be, if Koo's not out there, I really like Will Lutz this week. But he kind of has an injury designation, just like Groupie, limited participant at practice on Thursday. Actually, I'm sorry. I think he's trending towards not playing this week. But if he can't, can you look and see if he practiced in full today? That would tell me.
Groupie?
But if no, Will Lutz. But if he
Lutz.
did practice in full today, then I would fire him up after Koo. I do like Brandon McManus this week. I'm not sure how you feel about that. He had his first miss since week 3 last week, where he made 3 of his 4 field goal attempts. He missed wide right from 55 yards during the fourth quarter. But other than that, he converted from 40, 48, and 53 to help Jacksonville win the game in a tough divisional game last week. And he's made a career high 88% of his field goals this season.
Wow.
Two of his 3 misses have come from beyond 50 yards. So I get that can be a little bit frustrating for fantasy managers, because when you miss a 50-yard kick, I mean, it's a 6-point swing. You know, you've now lost 1 point rather than gaining 5. It's damn near a touchdown. So yep. I get that that's frustrating. After Koo and after Lutz, if Lutz practiced in full today, and after McManus, I do agree with your take on Jason Sanders. We know the Dolphins put up points. Thing about these offenses, we also know that Sanders has the best matchup in the league this week. The Commanders are giving up 9.75 points per game to kickers.
Yep.
We do expect to have a little rain in this game against Washington on Sunday, so keep an eye on that.
Yeah.
But Sanders has now converted a field goal try of 50-plus yards in back-to-back games after having not done so through the first 9 weeks of the season.
Yeah. To note, Will Lutz, he did practice in full today.
Okay, then yes. Koo, then Lutz, then McManus, then Sanders,
I would move Koo back behind Lutz, because I was looking at weather reports, actually, as you were going on.
Mm-hmm.
The Jets-Falcons game is expected to see scattered showers. So is the Pittsburgh-Arizona game. So is the Philly-San Francisco game. And even the Patriots-Chargers game. So as of right now, granted, this is Friday. The weather can change in between Friday and Sunday, but I'm going to keep everyone updated on that. It's a 91% chance of rain in the Chargers-Patriots game, a 92% chance of rain in the Jets-Falcons game, an 85% chance of rain in the Steelers-Cardinals game, and then a 53% chance of rain in the Dolphins-Commanders game. I think Will Lutz should be top, because, like you said, Tanner, he's been doing really well, and that game's in a dome, which helps him a lot. And the Niners-Eagles game has an 89% chance of precipitation. All the other games look pretty clear of precipitation, but something to monitor for the Niners-Eagles. Dolphins-Commanders is the lowest at 53%. Cardinals-Steelers. So a bunch of those games in the Northeast, the Jets at the Jets, at the Steelers, at the Patriots, and at the Philadelphia Eagles, and then the Commanders get looped in
Hmm.
there. But forecast can change from now until Sunday, so I'll keep you guys updated on the weather and what is concerning about that as far as kickers go. But I think that's it for me. What about you, Tanner?
Yes, just the last thing on Koo. He has the second best matchup in the league.
Yep.
So first is going to be Sanders, with the Commanders giving up 9.75 points per game to kickers. The Jets are just beneath that at 9.73,
Wow.
and Koo's kicking 90% accurately on his career. So I don't know whether or
He's a
not
stud.
I would fire the guy up, but
Yep.
in order of streamable kickers, I'd have it Koo, Lutz, McManus, Sanders, Gay, and then Chris Boswell, because we've seen a resurgence in this Pittsburgh offense.
Yep.
Only thing is, I do like to pay attention to how efficient offenses are in the red zone and stuff, because while you may look at it before the season starts and think, oh, the Chiefs have the best offense, have one of the best offenses in the NFL. I want to get Harrison Butker or even a guy like Tyler Bass. Like, these guys have been struggling because their quarterbacks are just too efficient in the red zone,
Yep.
and all they're getting is those 1 point extra points. So something to consider and something to monitor. And let's be honest, like, the Falcons are just not good in the red zone. So
Mm-mm. And this Jets defense is a lot better than any of the defenses they faced recently, I think. And they're going on the road. So I do like Koo a lot this week. If he's out there, go get him, because he's shown us before that he is a stud. So I do like that call. But that is pretty much our positional by position, matchup by matchup, all of our start sits, sleepers, busts. I will release my matchup analysis on Twitter tomorrow, so stay tuned for that. As along with the weather that concerns me. Even though I mentioned it on here, I'll do it again. Maybe the forecast changes between today and tomorrow. And yeah, that is it for this live stream for week 13. Tanner, you got anything else?
yeah, just want the viewers to know that we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about guys that are just no-brainer must starts.
Yeah.
Like, we're not gonna tell you about Amon-Ra St. Brown or Patrick Mahomes or guys like that. We're gonna cover the deeper leagues, cover the streamable players. Just, I don't know, just want the viewers to be aware of that. And also, guys, please keep it locked in on Twitter. Brady does a really good job at updating people on injuries and weather and expectations, dropping predictions. Seriously, there's a lot of information to gain on Twitter or x.com at BA Sports Podcast. Please give it a follow. We would really, really appreciate it.
Yep.
And yeah, thank you guys for listening.
Yep. Thank you guys for listening. Wherever you find your podcast, or if you're watching live on Twitter or YouTube right now, thank you for watching. We appreciate you guys, and we'll be back next week for week 14 after this by Mageddon to give you guys a preview. But look out on X as I will update you